Okay, great, thank you. So welcome everyone to the Tuesday, December 13 meeting of the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board. Pastor Spriggs, if you could take roll, please.
Yes. Eileen Delaney,
Here.
Marianne Pintar,
Here.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., I am here. Andrew Hayes, Dr. Arlie Brown, Nadia Keen Ayub, Bonnie King, Ariana Federico Mondragon.
Here.
Thank you. Tim Ware.
Tim is caught in traffic.
Okay, and G.I. Wilson.
Here. Tim
Thank
will be here shortly.
Okay. Thank you.
We have a quorum. Okay, thank you. Next agenda item is minutes approval from November 8th. Do we have any revisions or we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, Marianne Pintar. Do we have a second? I will make a second then.
I'm sorry, I said I second, but I was muted.
Oh, okay, that's great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, any other discussion? Okay, can you please take the roll for that, Pastor Spriggs?
Okay. Eileen Delaney.
Aye.
Sorry.
Let the record reflect that Andrew Hayes is here.
Okay, thank you. Marianne Pintar.
Yes.
Okay. Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., yes. Andrew Hayes.
Yes.
Dr. Arlie Brown. Nadia Keen Ayub. Bonnie King. I see Bonnie. Miss King.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ariana Federico Mondragon.
Yes.
Thank you. Tim Ware. That's right. He's on his way. And G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, minutes are approved. We have no presentation tonight, so we'll go to the executive officer's report. Mr. Parker?
I think we want to do public comment first.
Oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Public
And-
comments, yes, and I skipped over that. My apologies.
Chair Delaney, I have 3 requests to speak. Actually, it's like 4 right now.
Okay,
At this point, I'll put forward Audra Morgan.
Hello. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. I just first want to say I really appreciate what you guys do.
I'm sorry,
the
Chair
work.
Delaney. I'm very sorry to interrupt, but can everybody mute? I would love to hear public comment and I can't barking dog.
thank you. I was just going to say that.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you.
No, but Audrey, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really appreciate what all of you do, the work that you do and the time that you spend to keep people in this county accountable, especially the sheriff's department. I'm not sure all of you know it, but a month ago today, I was assaulted by the San Diego County Sheriff at a San Diego County Board of Supervisors meeting. They've been upping the ante. They started kind of showing force a little bit here and there about a year ago. And now anytime I speak, even today, they had a couple of sheriffs come over and they'll kind of stand and, trying to intimidate you. And it's I'm not really afraid for myself. I'm more afraid for the community and what can happen when things like this go on. I don't think anybody should be assaulted for any reason. And I know that, if I was in the board meeting with a gun or something and threatening somebody's life, and that warrants the kind of abuse that took place. But unfortunately, it's just, the first time they arrested somebody, it was for clapping. And now it's gotten to the point where they just, they're ready to just shut off the mic of the person as soon as their time is up. But it doesn't necessarily happen to everybody. I mean, there's people that they'll let go 30, 40 seconds, a minute over their time to finish what they're saying. But if it's somebody in dissent of what they want to hear, they basically want to shut us up and silence us. And they're using the sheriff to do it. And really, it terrifies me to know that they could do this to other people. I'm willing to take the brunt myself because I'm fighting for the freedom of all people. But I can't bear to see this happen today to anybody else. I mean, I have many injuries. I shouldn't have been so aggressively handled. And I know these officers, and that's part of the reason why it makes me so sad. Because, I have personal conversations with them, but then they kind of do these things that are beginning to be more and more aggressive as people come to these meetings, and it's making people not want to come to the Board of Supervisors and speak. They don't want to get a concussion. They don't want to have a dislocated rib and all these other injuries that I've sustained. And I don't want that for them. And so, I go to the Board of Supervisors meetings because I want to show people what they're doing. And I actually appreciate, I'm not sure who said it, but that you wanted to hear the public speakers because it's important. And, I think that these board members, it's like, unless it's going along with their agenda, they don't want to hear from us and they want to silence us, and they
Right.
apologize to the public
Ms. Morgan,
for,
Ms.
I'm sorry,
Morgan,
my time is up.
your
Okay.
time is up, Ms. Morgan.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I
Paul,
appreciate
can you
it.
hear me?
I can hear you, Dr. Brown.
I can't hear you all. I need to try something.
Okay, how about just go ahead and mute as we're going to move on with public comment. The next speaker will be Karen Remus. Karen, are you there?
I am. Thank you very much, Mr. Parker. Everybody, my name is Karen Remus, and my pronouns, are she, her, and hers. According to a November 23rd article in the San Diego Union Tribune, CLERB is still awaiting responses on 21 of the 38 policy recommendations that you have put forward to the sheriff's and probation departments this year. My understanding is that you do not currently have the power to compel a response by either the sheriff's or probation departments to your policy recommendations. Tonight, I urge you to bring this matter to the San Diego County Board of Supervisors and ask for it to take the lead in creating and implementing a mechanism or process that would require the San Diego sheriffs and probation departments to respond to your recommendations within a predetermined timeframe. CLERB members, your policy recommendations are too important to let lie stagnating. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Sunday Weddle. Miss Weddle. Miss Weddle? There you are, ma'am. There
Okay.
you are, ma'am.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sunday Weddle, the mother of Saxon Frederick Rodriguez. My son died in Central Jail last July. I just wanted to first say thank you to CLERB for the thorough investigation into Saxon's death. I have read and agree with the recommendations of CLERB that they're requesting of the sheriffs to follow and implement. I just want to say that let's keep pushing for the sheriffs to be transparent with their investigations, even if it's privately with the families of the in custody deaths, because ultimately all we want is the truth and the facts when we ask for it. Also, let's continue to push the DA to hold accountable the individuals responsible for the deaths. Nobody is above the law, and there should be no excuses being made. One last thing, my son Saxon was innocent. He was wrongfully arrested by the Chula Vista Police Department, and the city of Chula Vista has gone to some lengths to conceal the evidence from me, going as far as to threaten to sue me if I pursue the matter. It's important to note that Saxon died the day before he was to see the judge, and prove his innocence. So again, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ms. Weddle. Our condolences, of course. Next, we will go to I Miss Saxon. Is that Sabrina?
Hello.
Hi, Sabrina.
Hi, my name is Sabrina Weddle. I am Saxon Rodriguez's older sister and Sunday Weddle's firstborn daughter. I just want to say thank you for CLERB and all that they have done. I'm just here to continue the fight for my brother. It's December 13th. We have 12 days before we celebrate our second Christmas without my brother. And we still just want justice. One thing I've been persistent on asking Paul Parker is the video footage of my brother in his last moments. It would be nice if, the families are withheld a lot of information. And one thing that would mean a lot to me is just seeing my brother in his last moments, whether it's moments I don't want to see. We can't go to the jail cell and mourn or grieve. We can't take flowers. And again, everything that's going to be presented tonight is the fact that my brother's death was 100% preventable, no matter what the life he lived. The sheriff's deputies could have prevented my brother from dying July 20th, the day before his court date. And I just want it to be known he's very missed. His nephew misses him. His 3 little brothers miss him. And I just want to continue to say his name, Saxon Rodriguez. He died July 20th, 2021, a day before his court date, 4 days into being into custody. And I just want to not have anybody else here with us feeling this pain that I'm feeling. But thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our condolences. Next, we will go to Lori San Diego. Lori San Diego.
I apologize. This is actually Lori Saldana.
Sorry.
And I'm using a new Zoom program. So my name is Lori Saldana, and I was the Assembly Representative for San Diego. And next month will mark the 2nd year since I recommended to CLERB that you engage in an audit at the state level with the California State Auditor's Office. And I appreciate very much that you not only participated in their audit, but you did your own audit and looked into some of the practices that clearly need to be reformed, as the family members of yet another person who died in custody has just reminded us. As the 2nd year comes up, we have an excellent audit that was conducted and completed, and I wanted to suggest that you invite Dr. Akilah Weber, Assemblywoman Akilah Weber, in as part of your agenda presentation / training item, and have some interactions with her regarding how best to implement the recommendations of the audit going forward. It is only through legislative work, even the recommendations that you have regarding responses to your, let me rephrase that, responses to your recommendations might be something to be managed legislatively as well, that the sheriff's office has to respond. And I don't know if that was part of the audit, that they looked at the lack of response that you're getting. I see some of the recommendations go back to 2021 and you're still waiting on some response. But I would just encourage you to make use of her office. If not her personally, then maybe her local director, legislative director, and really use your knowledge and experience to help inform state legislation that could improve the conditions within the jails, because it will take state level authority. There really is no local agency that can direct the sheriff to change their practices since they're a constitutional office. So again, thank you for the work you're doing. I haven't participated in this meeting for a while because it frankly is frustrating to see so little progress being made. But I'm happy the audit was completed and remain hopeful that changes are coming. And Again, I want to encourage you to work with Akila Weber's office. I think she can help you move things forward. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we will go to Yusef Miller. Mr. Miller,
Hello, can you hear me?
we can.
Okay, it's Yusef Miller. I'm with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition and the Saving Lives in Custody campaign of 2020. And I like everyone has said, I applaud the movement that CLERB has done. I wish for a little bit more muscle to make sure that we can get these reforms implemented before anything else tragic happens from our lack of policy or lack of change. I would like to echo what the family of Saxon Rodriguez was saying, that they're coming up on the next holiday without their loved one, Saxon Rodriguez and Kevin Mills and his family, and Omar Arroyo and his wife, and Raymond Vogelman and his family, and so many other families. They feel that they have insult to injury when they don't have the information on what happened to their loved ones. If you could imagine the struggle and the pain of not knowing over the years of what happened to their loved one. We know that a lot of our people that are in our campaign, the families that are represented in our campaign, their deaths were preventable. And as Laura Saldana mentioned, from the audit that happened, we know that there are things that can be changed, that need to be changed, and that could prevent the loss of life of any other person in custody. Even one custody death that is preventable is unacceptable. So we thank you, CLERB, for doing what you do. And we thank you, Paul Parker, for reaching out to families and the staff to reaching out to families and trying to work things out. We felt that there was no try before we started getting involved with the Saving Lives in Custody campaign, and we see more trying now. So we thank you all, but we need a little bit more muscle to get some of these recommendations passed, and we're here to work with you. And lastly, I'll say, please don't underestimate the support of the grassroots organizations. The North County Equity and Justice Coalition is standing here with you. We have ideas, we have methods, and we can make sure that we push forward these recommendations from your office. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Paloma. Paloma, are you there?
Hi, yes, thank you, Paul Parker, and thank you, CLERB, for having me, letting me speak tonight. I appreciate the Rodriguez family, and I send their condolence. I wish we could have all met at a different circumstance and not through this. But I did read the Union Tribune article today, and it's so true, and it continues to the officers, the deputies, the departments continues to still do the same old thing. They refuse to really do the checks on the inmates, where a lot of these deaths are preventable. Even with my daughter, she was being watched 24/7 and she was still neglected. And so even more with these other cases with inmates that are not being supervised 24/7. I mean, there's one case where one inmate was like 2 hours or something like that. I mean, that's awful. And I don't think it's right, but I really do appreciate that the CLERB was able to look at Elisa Serna's case again. So where it's at now, I thank Yusuf for pushing it. I thank the CLERB for stepping up and looking at it one more time and seeing that, there is something wrong, but, we need to continue to fight this. It's so sad that our group is enlarging because of deaths, because we got something common, and it's awful. The holidays are here, birthdays are coming, the children are growing up, without our loved one. And we need to continue to fight and continue to pass bills to be able to push the hand of the sheriff department to rise up and do what they're supposed to be doing. It's supposed to care for these taxpayers are paying these people to care for our loved ones. Give them their medication, send them to the hospital, call 911, do your job. I believe they don't have children that are adults, yet. That's why our children are being treated the way they are. they don't understand, they don't know. And then God forbid that any of those people, children, will go through that. But they need to be stopped. They need to start hiring deputies that care, that actually love their job. Yes, I appreciate that they do what they do, because it's hard to be doing that type of job, but still, you can't just let them die. They're someone's loved one. You know, say his name, say her name. Please help us. We thank you.
My condolences, Paloma, and thank you. Next, we will go to Darwin Fishman, Dr. Fishman. Dr. Fishman.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, thank you. I want to thank the CLERB for doing its work, and I appreciate the UT article about tonight's meeting and working with impacted families on the wellness checks. And I really appreciate all the impacted families that have come tonight and presenting. Certainly working with Yusuf Miller, North County Equity and Justice Coalition, and the Racial Justice Coalition together on these issues. We're going to continue to press on this. And we just met with the sheriff, Sheriff Ray, as he goes out, and the sheriff is saying that they, of course, see your recommendations. They're not promising that they'll accept all of them, but we'll continue to do our work with the impacted families to push to make sure that if you do your work, CLERB, with these kind of recommendations, with stuff as simple as wellness checks that should already be done, that we'll make sure that the sheriff's department and other elected officials, supervisors, also help to put pressure on the sheriff's department. It's really important that people understand that with things like these wellness checks, it's not only just common sense and something on a basic level that you shouldn't need to have these kind of policy, which you're doing in recommendations. It really begs the question of why does a sheriff department have people working for it that care so little about human life, that they can't do basic things to see if the people they're responsible for are alive, having a stroke, having a heart attack, having a seizure, and will just let them die. It obviously means the culture of the sheriff's department and the leadership is completely out of whack, and it's done a horrible job. And we will continue to push on every level, not just the policy, but this deeply deaf culture that's in the sheriff's department is also changed, and that we can see the results. San Diego should not be leading in custody deaths when compared to Rikers Island. That's crazy. We should not be setting record years for in custody deaths every year. It's incumbent upon all the institutions that are responsible, like CLERB, like the district attorney, like the sheriff, to do their part to get us out of this and stop having this where we have to come to you with impacted families, these loss of family members, describing in painstaking detail about losing their family members and how heart-wrenching it is, these stories where their family members were in jail for a day, a few hours, and died because of incompetence, lack of care, and not following policies. Hopefully this really is a change for CLERB and getting on the right track and helping to hold the sheriff's department accountable. Thank you, and I hope that this work will continue.
Thank you, Dr. Fishman. Next, we'll go to Gilbert Gill's daughter, Jennifer. Jennifer Schmidt, is that you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jennifer. Your time starts now.
Okay, I am Jennifer, and my dad died 10 months ago tomorrow, Valentine's Day, in Vista Jail from neglect. I barely got the autopsy report, which showed he went unsupervised or unchecked for hours. There's a lot that can be done. There's a lot that they're not taking responsibility for. There's no transparency. We have to sue them for videos. And they said it was a heart attack, but was ruled the manner of death was an accident. It doesn't make any sense. It's just, we want answers. We want them to stop passing the buck and blaming the other person. I want answers. If they didn't do anything wrong, show the families the videos. Show us what they did or didn't do. And I want to know how much closer you guys are to getting medical under where you guys can evaluate them as well. And Sunday and Paloma, I love you girls. Here to support both of you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And real quickly to that point, I'm going to be providing a real brief update later on in this open session about where we are about jurisdiction expansion. Next, we will go to Robin Sales. Ms. Sales, are you
Hi.
there?
Yes, I am. I'm sitting here with the picture of the Weddle family, Saxon's family in front of me that was in the UT today. Sabrina and Sunday, that is the most beautiful picture. I just want to let you know, I hope you have that in front of you all the time so you can remember the good family time that you had. It's heartbreaking to look at it and knowing that Saxon is not alive due to neglect of the sheriff deputies in the jails. I'm from the Showing Up for Racial Justice North County, the North County Equity and Justice Coalition, and the Racial Justice Coalition. And we've been coming to you for 25 months now. It's longer than many of you have been on the CLERB. And I know our advocacy has made a difference. And I'm here to say that I have tremendous admiration for the families of all the people who've been here today and all the many others who've lost loved ones, because it's easy to get angry and embittered and do nothing, and much harder to be an activist and to stand up and say, this isn't right. And the sad part about all this is that besides being preventable, there just doesn't seem to be any accountability on the part of the Sheriff's Department. And I know it's your job to make sure there's accountability. And I want to echo Natalie Lachatte's earlier comment in that there needs to be a limit on the amount of time the Sheriff's Department can take to respond to you. These families are waiting for justice, and they've been waiting for so long for justice. And now it's incumbent upon the Sheriff's Department to be more responsive. I'm part of the Behavioral Health Advisory Board. I'm newly on the executive committee, and I'm speaking for myself. But one of the things we had Teresa Adams-Haidar at our last meeting in November, and as you might know, she's the assistant sheriff in charge of detentions. And I truly believe she wants to make specific changes so that people are evaluated early on in the booking process and not booked, so that if they need mental health or substance abuse care and treatment, they can be diverted before they end up in a prison cell. And so I would ask you to invite the assistant sheriff to come to CLERB and to have maybe a panel discussion to talk about what changes she intends to make and is making, where they are in the process of making those changes, and when can we expect to see those changes?
Ms. Sales, thank you.
Yes,
Your
sorry.
time is up, Ms. Sales.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Lynn Owens. Lynn Owens, are you there?
Yes,
Go ahead, ma'am.
I'm Lynn Owens. I live in zip code 92131. I'm mostly just going to echo what other people have already said tonight. It's very impactful. Thank you for all the good work you're doing. People in detention facilities deserve to be safe. The lives and well-being of inmates matter. I'm as frustrated as everyone by the slow responses. I've been reading the Union Tribune reports. I'm happy to hear all the suggestions coming forward about using the power of the state legislature, the power of the Board of Supervisors to help make improvements and concrete changes in the way that your recommendations are addressed. It's gotta be better. I had more to say, but everything that I had to say has pretty much been said, except I just want you to make sure you do understand that there are a lot of us watching what you do. And we're very grateful for the oversight that you give and the thoughtful recommendations that you make, but there's got to be a way to have it have more effect. And we look forward to seeing things change in the time ahead. That's all I'll say for tonight.
Thank you, Lynn Owens. And finally, we will go to Dr. Tom Packard. Dr. Packard, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Tom Packard. I'm a member of Showing Up for Racial Justice North County. At your November meeting, I requested that every agenda include under policy recommendations pending responses, a report on the status of your recommendations. I appreciate seeing some recommendations on today's agenda, but an article in the November 23rd UT has prompted me to reframe this request. Mr. Parker has been helpful by including the status reports in his executive officer report. And I see that there are 2 responses from the sheriff on this agenda. But because Lieutenant Greenewald was quoted in the UT as having said that he does not want to give quote unquote half answers and half measures, or give you a false sense of hope or cherry pick things, if those comments are accurate, I need to say that I have a lot more faith in your analytic abilities to be able to handle regular progress reports. I appreciated several of you making this request at your last meeting, so I want to reinforce this and suggest specifically that there should be a separate sheriff and probation attachment for every meeting, which includes progress and the current status of all outstanding recommendations. For each recommendation, staff should note the recommendation, its original referral date, and report what steps are, where the step they are at in the process, what steps are planned, and when they expect a final response. If nothing has been done on a recommendation, have that stated, ideally with a notation of any barriers and plans to move something forward. This reporting might help their staffs be more proactive in moving things along. They could also ask for additional support from you or from us in the community if they're facing barriers that they aren't handling effectively themselves. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Packard. And it looks as if, okay, Michael Cerna. Michael Cerna, are you there?
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Cerna. We can hear
Hello,
you.
yes, I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to be a part of this CLERB meeting. It is still, it's still mind-boggling for me just to, here we're having meetings and we have committees and we have all these things that have been in place for years. And I know I keep saying it every time. I feel like I keep saying it every time that I get on. It's like I say the same thing, but here we have all these committees. We have all these people that are in place, and they're there to help the community. But still, people die. Still, people don't care. You still got an attitude of indifference towards the inmates in the county jail. I appreciate the CLERB and all the things that people do, but to me, it's just a waste of time sometimes just to be able to be a part of all of this, because it's that nothing gets done. Nothing gets done. We need people that are everyday people on that committee, people that have experienced the things that we experienced, that are not just working for the county or not just going on to just to fulfill a job position. We need people with hearts. We need people with compassion in those CLERB and all these committees. One of the things that frustrated me the most, and I'm sure it frustrated everybody, and I think I've already said it too before, is that when Governor Newsom turned us down and said, because he already had a meeting, what's the difference between 15 and 13? Well, if the 13 ain't doing their job, then that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about here tonight. That people need to start doing their jobs, not just the sheriffs, but everybody involved in the back scenes. Here we got a new sheriff. And what, just now she's all quiet. She don't want to talk to nobody because she was elected, because she got into what she was, where she wanted to be. She don't need to pay attention to us no more. They're not caring about us or, the individuals. It's been real quiet. Nobody's passed away in the jails. I bet you they're all doing their jobs now because they know they're under the gun. And this is just insane to me, how we keep on going over and over around the same circles and nothing's being done. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Our condolences, of course. And with that, Chair Delaney, that concludes public comment.
Thank you. Okay, we have no presentation tonight, so we'll go to Mr. Parker for your executive officer's report.
Thank you, Chair Delaney, and thank you to all the folks who spoke tonight. Over the last month, I presented an overview of CLERB at the California Civilian Oversight Association's meeting, but then earlier today, I had an opportunity to talk to Detention Academy recruits about CLERB, about the issues that CLERB has uncovered, about the policy recommendations, about the deaths in the detention facilities. And it was inspiring for me that the group of folks that I talked to who will be working in the jails when they graduate were very, very involved in the conversation, very receptive, had ideas and things that they thought maybe could be done. So it's good to see that's the folks that are being trained right now, right, to move forward to further the mission inside the detention facility. So I did want to point that out. It was a good opportunity for me also to really talk about CLERB. As far as our investigative workload, attachment B kind of says it all, right? Last month, at the end of last month, we had 150 cases. That is much more than we had last year. It's about the average that we have in non-pandemic times. So that's where we stand as of this moment with another month to go. We have 34 open death cases right now. 3 of those investigations are on tonight's agenda. We have materials for 13 of the 34, and we're waiting for materials from the respective departments on the other 21. There were 2 new death cases in November reported to us. One was at San Diego Central Jail. The other actually happened a couple of months ago, but it was outside of the jail facility. It was a reference to an investigation. And so that was not a detention facility jail, but that was reported to us last month. We have had 13 open uses of force resulting in great bodily injury cases. At this point, 3 of those, of course, are on tonight's agenda. And we have materials for 11, still waiting for materials on 2. 5 open discharges of firearms. We have materials for 2 of those, and then no open uses of force at protest. As far as our reports by due date and reports by case number, the status report attachment C, I'm not going to really harp on it. It's there for you to look at. We are in a much better position with the staffing that we have, with the level of staffing, I should say, and the thoroughness of our investigations, that we are nowhere near what we used to be as far as back up against the wall or threat to having any cases time out. And that's always been what the public has said to us. And we have done everything in our power to be, and thank you for the staffing and the funding. We are at the point now where we have better staffing and funding than we've ever had. And you're now seeing thorough investigations that reflect that in a timely fashion. For the most part, in a timely fashion. There's still things we can do, and we will. That's our focus for next year. I sent 1 email to the full CLERB, and that was an email with the article from the Union Tribune in reference to the status of CLERB's policy recommendations. At this point on the agenda, you'll see that there are 17 recommendations pending response from the Sheriff's Department and 5 from the Probation Department. I had an opportunity to meet with the Sheriff's Department a little earlier today, and I have been assured and know that all the recommendations, especially those from detention services, they've been looked at, and they're in progress. And I'm sure that the Division of Special Services Sergeant can fill us in on that a little bit later. But I'm certain that we will be getting many of these recommendations responses back to us very, very shortly. I've been told that, and I believe it. And I believe it. So that's where we stand on that. As far as our recommendation responses, we don't have any for this month. I know that I think somebody at the public comment said we have 2 that we received. Not true. We don't have any. We're making 7 total during closed session, about 2 death cases and 1 non-death case. But the response that we have is a sustained finding response on a case in which the Sheriff's Department, the CLERB had sustained a finding, and the Sheriff's Department wrote back and said that they've handled it through the chain of command. It's been forwarded on. So that's where we stand, folks. That's my executive officer report. I'm open to any questions or comments, of course, from the public. Vice Chair Pintar, I see you may have a question for me.
Yes, do you need to go to the public first though, or?
I don't see anybody from the public.
Okay. Yes, question, Paul. I'm not trying to create more work for staff, but it would be helpful, I think, to me and maybe to the public for when we include the recommendations pending responses on the agenda, if we added the date the recommendation was made. As I read through them, I recall the cases, I recall why we made the recommendations. It would help me rather than having to go back and look for the cases, search the cases in my files from previous meetings, just to know the date the recommendation was made. Is that something we could include on future agendas?
And that would be me. Of course, I can do that. I want to actually include 2 dates to be transparent. I want to include the date then that this board approved the recommendation, and then the date that I forwarded the official letter. Because what happens is this board says, yes, move forward. And then we draft a letter and send that to the sheriff's department. I want to make sure, because sometimes that doesn't happen like that day or the next day. There may be a little bit of time, but to be fair to the department, I want to make sure it's all out there. So yes, I will put that date on. I will put the date also that it was forwarded officially from the department. Now, the department is made aware of the recommendations, prior to the meeting. It's on the agenda, right? But they're not going to my understanding, not going to do anything until it's officially approved by CLERB, because you folks could change it after we make the recommendations.
I understand. I do think that the context would be helpful though. My second question, Paul, is that under the probation, so there's a few that are there's only most of them are the sheriff's department. There's a few that are probation that we haven't heard back from. On the last one from the probation department, prohibition of law enforcement gangs. Remind me why that's only a recommendation for probation and not under the sheriff's department.
The sheriff's department followed the law, implemented their policy prohibiting the participation in law enforcement gangs on December 31st of 2021. The law went into effect January 1st of 2022.
I did not remember that. Okay, thank you. That I think was my questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And no one else from the pub. Does anyone else have any comments? Paul, can you see anyone from the public?
No, ma'am. There's no one from the public.
And could the record reflect that Mr. Ware is here as well? Thank you. All right, we'll go to board chair's report. I'd like to thank Paul, staff, and the investigators for their excellent work. We are moving forward, and I really appreciate that. I'd like to thank the members of the public for your input and your ideas and your advocacy and your support. And I want to assure families and others, and reassure as well, that we do care. And that's why we're here. And as the holidays approach, I know that this is a very difficult time. And for those of you that have lost loved ones, I do wish you peace. And with that, we'll go to new business.
Chair Delaney, that new business would be the continuance of teleconferencing meeting option pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E. And I believe you'll turn it over to Ms. Hoffman, yeah?
I will. Council?
Hi, if your board wishes to continue teleconferencing, the appropriate finding would be that CLERB has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency and that state or local officials continue to recommend measures to promote social distancing.
Okay. And do we have a motion?
So moved.
That would be
Brown.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, Pastor Spriggs, any discussion? Members of the public, any discussion there? No, okay. Call for the vote then, Pastor Spriggs?
Yes. Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Mary Ann Pintar,
Yes.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., yes. Andrew Hayes,
No.
Dr. Arlie Brown,
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub, Bonnie King,
No.
Ariana Federico Mondragon,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
Yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
That concludes the vote.
Okay. Was that 5-2?
Motion passes. We had.
Okay, thank you, Council. Okay. All right, next we'll go to unfinished business.
Thank you, Chair Delaney. This business item I've put back on the agenda at the request of the public, rightfully so. I included in my executive officer report last month, but to make it a standalone item, we have been working, County Council and I have met numerous times in reference to the revising our rules and regulations, starting with the rules and regulations and then the code, the administrative code, to include or to present and propose having jurisdiction over medical service providers. During the course of over the course of the last couple of months, watching sheriff candidate debates, having conversations with Sheriff Ray, and having just in general looking at everything, we have decided to expand our attempt to increase our jurisdiction, not just to medical service providers at the detention facilities, but also all personnel who work for the Sheriff's Department. I have not had the opportunity. I have a meeting with the Chief Probation Officer. Unfortunately, it's not until after the first of the year, but I have verbalized the desire to do the same with the Probation Department. But until I meet with the Chief Probation Officer, I'm not going to move forward with anything at this point. I'd like to talk to her first, just to, she's hearing it now, but she's already heard it before, but just before we sit down, okay? And so the next steps, so that everyone knows the next steps, we are, the proposed rules and regulations are the revision. I think we're just about done with that. Now we're going to be looking at the code. And so making the appropriate proposed revisions to that. Next, it would then go to labor relations for meet and confer with the affected unions, right? And so right now we know that that's going to be SEIU. It's also going to be DSA to a point, because some of the changes we make, we want to make sure that the DSA has that opportunity as well, even though the majority of it's not going to impact them specifically, but there may be a couple little things that do. Because we're also proposing that we take away our 1-year time limitation. We hamstring ourselves by not being able to look at things that have come to us 13 months before, after the alleged act occurred. Sheriff's Department and Probation Department, they can review what they want when they want. Now, granted, they may not do a full investigation into something that's minor, that's brought in over a year after the alleged act occurred, but our own rules and regulations ties us up. Why? What's the point, right? So we want to do that too. So that obviously will impact the DSA. So I'm being transparent right here. This is what we're looking to do. So after it goes to labor relations, I think that obviously the right thing to do while labor relations, is looking at it, we also want to maybe, and we haven't presented this to the board yet, but maybe look at having a town hall or a special meeting, otherwise known as a town hall, that we talk about this and we hear from the public as we move forward. That would be my recommendation. That's what we're looking at as we move forward. Nothing about those steps have been solidified yet, because we want to get our proposed revisions done first and get them to labor relations first. But I want everyone to know that I'm going to do everything I can to communicate with the departments first as we move forward, before we move forward, but then also talk to the community, and then let's see what we can do as we move forward. Does that, Chair Delaney, answer? Is that a sufficient overview? Do you have any questions?
I think so. Does anyone have any questions from the public or the board? Definitely a step in the right direction, that's for sure. I'd like to see that happen. Okay. If we have no comments or questions, we'll go to board member comments. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say?
All right, Chair Delaney, I do see one public comment.
Oh, okay. I can't see it, so I apologize to the public.
It's Sheriff Ray, are you there?
Oh, hi. Hi, Sheriff Ray. How are you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can, Sheriff.
Hi, thank you for this time. Just a couple of things. One, I absolutely support the expansion of your authority. I think that the clerk should have the ability to examine every employee in the sheriff's department. And in terms of the medical personnel, I did that 4 years ago in the sheriff's department. I expanded our internal affairs ability to conduct investigations on misconduct for our people. I think you should do the same thing. Secondly, aside from SEIU, you should probably also talk to the Association of San Diego County Employees, or ASDCE. We have a handful, maybe 40, 50 people in that union. It is a union. There are people that work for us that belong to that. It's the Association of San Diego County Employees. And that should be part of that. I just wanted to voice my support for that in terms, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And thank you for your support. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Sheriff. Next, we do have one additional speaker on this topic.
Okay.
Thank you, Sheriff. Next, we will go to Audra Morgan. Ms. Morgan.
I just wanted to kind of reiterate that I really appreciate the things that you guys are doing. And, you know, if there's any way that you can make it a way so that you guys can enforce the recommendations somehow that you are giving the sheriff, because it seems like they like to take them and kind of toss them to the side as though they're not really a valid complaint. You know, and just having the sheriff call in and say that he's doing those things, you know, I'm concerned that that's not really taking place. And I just really want to reiterate that there is a problem with the way that the just conflicts are handled within the sheriff's department. And I just hope that, you know, that you guys can get some movement within what you're doing to get these sheriffs to be held accountable, because I feel like even though you bring about these recommendations, they get to determine whether or not they are enforced. And so I don't know, I really feel like something needs to change in that arena, because otherwise, I mean, everything that is being done is kind of pointless. So regardless, I'm appreciative of what you guys do. I thank you for the time that you spend on it. And I just kind of wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. There are no, well, I see that the Vice Chair Pintar has a comment. Shouldn't we?
Go ahead. I wasn't sure if I needed to wait for Eileen to.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. Just because it is within the rules that we aren't supposed to respond to public comment, I just wanted to express my sincere condolences to the families that spoke tonight as well. We don't really get a chance to do that because we don't respond to comment, but I think I would like to say, I know that in our conversations with the board, everyone cares a lot, and we really want you to know that we hear you. And I know I wouldn't be here if it wasn't something that I cared about, and that we don't feel a great deal of compassion for you. And we are seeking to make changes that are better for the public, better for the incarcerated people that you know, are being served, and also better for law enforcement. So I just wanted to state that, because we don't really get a chance to respond, and that seems not right to me when these families are coming forward and making these very heartfelt and painful comments to go without response. So thank you for letting me say that.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Pastor Spriggs?
Thank you. Yes, I too wanted to give my condolences to the families who spoke on tonight, and just know that I feel their pain, and I want them to know that I'm trying my best to do what I can to ensure that this stops. So my condolences. May God be with you.
Thank you, Pastor. Mr. Wilson?
I concur with Ms. Pintar and Pastor Spriggs, and offer my condolences as well.
Thank you. Okay. There aren't any more comments. We'll move on. Sheriff's Probation Liaison queries. Do we have any questions?
Chair Delaney, that was the board member comment section that we just did, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, how are you,
Okay,
Sergeant?
Sergeant Tingley with the Sheriff's Department. I just wanted to respond to some of the comments in regards to the policy recommendations. I want everybody to know, in the community and the board, that the San Diego Sheriff's Department takes these policy recommendations seriously. We have received 31 policy recommendations from CLERB. 14 of those have been answered. 13 are in the final stage currently, and 4 are still being reviewed. We've received 15 of those policy recommendations, or excuse me, 17 of those policy recommendations in the last 2.5 months. So I just want everybody to know that we are reviewing these policies. We are working on them. These policies, recommendations are not always at times easy to respond to. We have a lot of steps that we have to go through and a lot of people that have to look at them. So these are currently being reviewed. And like I stated, out of the 17 that have not been responded to, those are being worked on, and there's 13 of them currently in the final stages. And we're still working on reviewing the other 4 to get those over to CLERB as well. So as soon as those get done, I will make sure that we get them over to you. And I'm in contact with Paul Parker and making sure that he understands where we're at on this process. But I just wanted to give you an update on that.
Thank you, Sergeant. Ms. Pintar, did you have a question?
I do have a question. First of all, thank you, Sergeant Tingley, for that response. That's helpful to know where things are, and appreciate. And I know that Paul has told us that you are in contact with him, so appreciate that. And I also wanted to thank Sheriff Ray for his comment in support of expanded jurisdiction for CLERB. That was encouraging to hear. I have a question. This pertains to a couple of recent cases, and I'm not sure that Paul had the answer either. Maybe Sergeant Tingley, you can answer, or Sheriff Ray can. When people are brought into one of the booking detention facilities, and they're reviewed for appropriateness or wellness, well enough to be booked. I don't remember what the terminology is, but there is a terminology for that, when they can be, go ahead and be booked. They're examined, they're asked questions, they're asked to self-report, I believe, whether they have, had recently ingested drugs or alcohol, or if they have any medical conditions. At least that's what I understand from my reading of these reports. Is that correct? Are they only self-reporting these things, Sergeant Tingley, or is there additional urinalysis or any other analysis to determine whether they are perhaps in withdrawal, for example?
Everybody that gets booked into our facilities goes through a drug screening. That is something that's done for everybody. Now, obviously, if they're combative and they're unable to provide that, or they're not willing to do that, then that will be done later by medical staff. But yes, medical staff does conduct a drug analysis on everybody that's booked into our facility.
Okay, so if they were under the influence or had recently been under the influence, that would have been detected, that would be detected by the medical staff prior to booking. Is that correct?
Well, during the booking process.
During
yes.
the booking, sorry.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any?
Chair Delaney, we have one additional board member comment, but just so you know, for this topic, for the Sheriff Probation Liaison query, we have 3 requests to speak.
Okay. Shall we go to them first? Mr. Ward, do you mind waiting, or do you want? Okay.
He says, okay.
All right.
Dr. Fishman.
Thank you. I just wanted to add real quickly, based on my experience when I served on the Community Review Board, San Diego, it is possible to establish a relationship. You have a new sheriff coming in, where if for the policy recommendations, if they have issues, concerns, or problems with it, they can come to your meeting and bring it up. So this thing about 14 and 17 of them, that's nice, but I hope that you're setting up some kind of structure, and our committee meetings where public could attend, where the San Diego Police Department would actually have to tell us what their objections were to our recommendations and give us an opportunity to hash it out. I hope, again, with an opportunity with a new sheriff coming in, that you establish some kind of relationship where that can be an open process, and hopefully CLERB recommendations will be accepted. And if not, it'll be clear reasons why that's not the case. I don't know the ones that were just referenced, if CLERB knows which ones those are and what the positions are from the sheriff's department, because I haven't heard any discussion of that. And that just leaves the public obviously guessing and not knowing what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fishman. Before we move on to the next public speaker, in reference to that, when the sheriff's department responds, when they've done their complete review and they respond, which they respond to every recommendation. When they do, it's they give us a letter that we make public as an attachment to our agenda. So the reasons in that letter lists the reasons that either they say, yes, we accept this, or we accept it in part, or no. Especially over the last year or so, they've been very, very good about laying out exactly why they do not, their belief as to why they're not going to implement the policy or why they've accepted it. So the ones that are finalized and we get the results on, we do have that information. Next, I will go to Sabrina. Sabrina Weddle, are you there? Sabrina?
Hello, sorry, I didn't realize I had to unmute, sorry. So I was hearing Miss Pintar, I believe, ask about the self-evaluation when they're doing intake, and then they're asking if they have done drugs or are on drugs. Now, if the inmate is saying no or not speaking, how much time goes by before they come back to that inmate and find out they're on drugs or not on drugs if that inmate is not willing to speak in the initial process?
That's a good question. Sergeant.
Okay, go ahead, Chair Delaney.
Sergeant Tingley, could you answer that?
I would have to get back on that exact answer. I mean, all situations can change, it depends on what time they get booked in, what stage they're in, whether or not they're going to have a doctor visit immediately or later. And so I don't have an exact answer for that. I mean, that's a great question, and I would love to be able to get back to you on that, but I don't have the exact answer and I don't want to give misinformation.
Could you maybe report back next month on that for us?
Yeah. If we could get, yeah, I'll write it down. If we could get Paul to also write it down, that'd be great. And I'll get back to you next month at the next.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Parker, I interrupted you. Did you want to make a comment about that?
No.
Okay.
I'll work with, we'll make sure that that's on our follow-up action items, on Sergeant Tingley's follow-up action items after this meeting.
Okay.
Next, we will go to Ms. Morgan. Ms. Morgan?
Yes, thank you. So I just want to talk from personal experience being in the Las Colinas jail twice so far. They do ask you if you've, I don't even think they asked me if I was on drugs. It was more some other things, but they didn't test me. So, I mean, at any point I could have been in there on cocaine, fentanyl, whatever it is, and they never would have known. So that's the thing. It's like, they're saying that they're doing these things and enforcing these policies or whatever, but I'm not finding that to be the case when I've been taken to jail. They've x-rayed me and things like that to see if I've had anything in my cavities or whatever, but they didn't actually drug test me. So there wouldn't have been a time for them to know if I was on drugs or not. So I feel like there's a lot of loose holes and gaps that are happening, and they're not really checking to see if people are on drugs. I know that they would kind of do checks a little bit here and there, like going through my cell. But as far as finding out if I was on drugs, they never found that out one way or another. So, they're not enforcing these things like they should. And I feel like that's a problem, is that there's a lot of things that goes on in the sheriff's department where they're saying they're doing these things, but they're not actually checking the people. And then, people wind up dying from a drug overdose or whatever it is. So something needs to change. And I just wanted to say my own personal account of that so that you guys understand that that isn't happening the 2 times that I've been in there. I don't know if it would have happened a month ago if they would have actually remanded me to jail, but yeah, so thank you. I appreciate you letting me speak.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Morgan.
you.
There are no
Anyone
other
else, Mr.
requests-
Parker?
There are no other requests to speak
Okay.
in public.
So we'll go back to Mr. Ware and then Dr. Brown and then Mr. Hayes.
Good evening. Thank you. I just had a question for Sergeant Tingley. I was wondering if he could share with us what exactly is that the process for when they're evaluating our policy recommendations. I've heard it come up a couple of times. I just want to know what are we looking at from a time frame so I can have a better understanding with that. If you could do that, and then the other part, I think maybe you've answered this in meetings past. Is mentioning are we searching everyone who comes who's transported to the jails, or just those who are being booked?
I'm sorry, say it again, sir.
Are we doing searches for everyone who's transported to our jails, or just those who are being booked into the jail?
No, everybody that comes into the facility is searched. The arresting officer searches them prior to even bringing them into our facility. And once they come into our facility, they're searched again by our jail deputies at intake prior to going into the medical screening area where their photos taken. And then once they get done with that, they're ran through the scanner just to make sure there's nothing in their persons. And then they come into a holding cell. So they're definitely searched.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And to answer your other question, as far as the time frame, sir, those are difficult because as they go up the chain of command, a lot of things determine, how long it's going to take. I mean, sometimes there's people on vacation, sometimes people are sick, things like that. They have to meet in a meeting, like a group setting, make sure that everybody's on the same page, make sure everybody's reviewing these policies, and make sure that we're providing you with the best answer and solution for the issue that's been brought to our attention. So there really isn't a time frame that I can provide, but I will tell you that we are working on these policy recommendations, and we're working extremely hard on them and trying to make sure that we get them back in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Dr. Brown, did you still want to say something? Your hand is down.
Actually, I do, and thank you for this opportunity. And my question is also to Sergeant Tingley. In addition to the drug challenges that are going on in the jail, basically my question is 2-part. We also know that you have some mental challenges that are also being presented to you all. And what I'm trying to get at is, what's your process of, or your officer's process of meeting with leadership as a group or someone representing officers to say, look, things are becoming challenging. How do we get this resolved? Is it a report from one person, or is it via a group meeting? We know there are people who are dealing with people in jail also have some of the same needs of feelings, and they can be overwhelmed as well. So how do they bring recommendations for change in order to do their job better, to provide better care and services to the inmate? What does that look like? Or would you have to come back to us later with the answer? I don't want to overburden you with questions.
Well, I think the question is kind of complicated because I think it's multiple questions in one.
Okay.
But I'll try my best. But if we could get that in writing, maybe that'd be great. I think part of your question is, if I'm understanding it correctly, how do the incarcerated persons relate information to staff, or how does staff relate information to command staff?
How does staff relate information to command staff for additional resources to be able to do their job better?
Well,
And
sorry, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, in the sheriff's department, we work under the chain of command structure. So if a deputy has an issue with something or needs more supplies, they'd go to a sergeant would go to a lieutenant, captain, etc. But I will tell you that, our commanders, captains, assistant sheriffs, they do come and work in the facilities. And so they see what's going on in the facilities. They understand what's going on in the facilities, and deputies are able to approach and talk to them when warranted or if they need to. So we do have open door policies around here. Everybody's pretty open to allowing us to communicate whether or not it's a deputy to an assistant sheriff commander, et cetera. So, but if it's something that needs to be addressed and it's something that needs to be worked on, then it goes through the chain of command and then it goes up and it gets addressed.
Okay. And the other question, part of my question was with the challenges that you are all seeing via people who need mental health. Are you seeing any changes there, or what are the resources like for that with people who come in? We know that's not what if they're in your care, that's you have to try to provide those resources the best way you can. But we know that that's also with sort of like homeless people or displaced individuals or people with mental challenges coming in who are incarcerated. You know what, Paul, I think this is something, if you don't mind, I'd like to take off the table and talk to them about maybe on a one-on-one session or something.
Well,
like
that would be great. But also, just so you know, we do have mental health staff in the facilities that go around and speak to individual incarcerated persons as it relates to their mental health.
Good.
So we do have that, and they assess them and they give them their, the required medication if they need it. If they need to be taken out of the facility to appointments, then they can recommend that. So we do have that. But if you do have other complicated questions that you need answered, if you could please give that to Paul, I would be happy to take a look at that and see what we can provide for an answer.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I think also it would be beneficial when we can go back to having some of the tours or going to the detention centers and seeing the process as well for the new board members. Mr. Hayes, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Chair Delaney. This is more of a comment, a question, I think, for Mr. Parker. He had made a statement about, and this is, forgive me, because I'm new, I'm just trying to understand the process of policy approval and response that we get. So we get a response and then we approve the response from the,
No, we make the recommendation to you. Staff makes a recommendation to the board in closed session. If it's case related, the board will discuss the policy recommendation in closed session. We put it out to the public, but the conversation about it takes place behind closed doors if it's case related. If it's not case related, then it occurs in open session. So whenever CLERB approves what we're recommending, at that time, then I draft a letter. It's signed by the chair, send it to the sheriff's department or probation department. When they respond to that, I put it on the agenda as a response at the next meeting, whenever the next meeting is. And that is the information provided to you folks. We don't approve or not, right? What they choose to do with it. They approve what to do with it or not. And again, as many members of the public have said, and as we've talked in the past, the departments, they don't have to do any of this. They don't have to communicate to us at all about if they're going to implement it or not, because of our solely our advisory role. But they are doing that response in public.
Thanks.
Mr. Wilson, and then we have Federico Mondragon.
My question to Sergeant Tingley is tangent to what Mr. Ware was asking about the process. It seems that the process is long and there are variables or barriers in that process. Is it possible that Mr. Parker and the sergeant could get together and review that process and see how that process could be streamlined and expedited? I got the impression if somebody goes on vacation, things shut down. That shouldn't happen. So I think that if we don't have a good handle on the review process for our policy recommendations, it's something that should be addressed and looked at and definitely streamlined, and looked at those barriers that slow the process down. So I'm wondering if Mr. Parker and the sergeant could work on that together.
Mr. Wilson, if I may, I know this is probably directed for Sergeant Tingley. I'm willing to do whatever the department allows me to do. That would be up to the department.
Well, Mr. Parker, why don't you, after the meeting, see what you can do and see if there's anything that, you guys can work on. Ms. Federico Mondragon.
Thank you. Hi, Sergeant Tinley. I have a request now that I'm thinking and everything that I'm hearing about like the different processes. I'm wondering if CLERB could actually put together like a diagram that shows like the steps that go into not only the complaints that are filed and what the steps look like, but also like in policy, like what goes into those steps and the different options if it doesn't become policy. If it does, how does it get integrated? I'm kind of just thinking as a person, like I'm hearing the conversations, and I think a visual would be helpful to kind of understand what happens. That could also be a resource for folks to kind of, not just hear that policy is happening and changes are happening, but I think that it's useful to have that resource to look back to. Just a comment that I think I would appreciate and I think would be helpful for other folks to understand the process, of this board and the work that everyone does here.
So let me ask you, are you talking, you're two different things, right? You're talking about the cases that we investigate and review. And then the other one, you're talking about recommendations that we make to the Sheriff's Department?
Yeah, so the review process, and then like how does policy recommendations, what process does that look like?
Okay.
Chair Delaney.
Of course.
If I may, Ms. Federico Mondragon. So we, staff, can put together a diagram. It's a great idea. Absolutely. And we have the personnel that can do that and do it very well. We can put together our internal diagrams about how our what's a step in the investigation, how it leads to a policy recommendation, or how policy recommendations, arise when it's not case related. We can certainly do that. And I can have that to you. But as far as if I understand what you're saying, after the policy recommendation gets to the respective departments, I can't do that, right? I can only get the diagram to you folks to when you approve it, and then I can then take a break. And then the next part of the diagram would be once the recommendation is back to us, then what do we as staff do with it? That is what we can do. I will do.
Yeah, and I think that's why I mentioned Sergeant Tingley. Like I know that there's different processes that it could be a collaboration for both the board and the department.
Thank you. Dr. Brown, and then Ms. Pintar.
I just have one more question because I'm just thinking about ways to help resolve some of the challenges. The staffing level, Sergeant Tingley, can you just maybe briefly discuss how, what your staffing is like in the jails and how that may be impacting services? Are you very short staffed now, or how many more people you need?
We definitely need more people to come and apply at the Sheriff's Department. And yes, our staffing levels have seen a decrease, but we are currently hiring. So if you know anybody that's willing to come and put in, that would be great. But yeah, everybody in the state, everybody in California, maybe in the whole United States is having issues right now with just hiring of officers. So, we're doing our best. We're working extremely hard at, trying to get recruits to come through the doors and, provide a service to the county.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Vice Chair Pintar.
Thank you. I just want, there's obviously a lot of interest in where the status of these recommendations are. There's a couple of newer board members that have asked about the process for these recommendations. Sergeant Tingley reported back that there have been response to more recommendations than maybe all of us thought there had been or members of the public were aware of. I'm just wondering if it would be helpful, Paul, and we could talk about how to structure it. Instead of a presentation training or during the presentation and training portion of our meeting next month or the month after, we could talk about the recommendations that have been made and what the responses have been, because there have been some that have been adopted, correct? I mean, they haven't all been rejected. Some of them have been adopted, which we appreciate. And maybe you just said, Paul, that you were going to provide an update on some of the policy recommendations that are being considered a status report. Is that what you said? That you were going to have a report back on several of them next month? Is that correct?
Not for me. What I said in my EO report was that in consultation with the sheriff's department, they provided me an update that they're pretty much what Sergeant Tingley confirmed afterwards, right? Everything he just said, that they're 13 are in the final stages and whatnot. So he expanded upon that, and no, his department will, when they give us the answers, then I'll present those answers. I was not going to give a status update on them, other than what's already on the agenda, which is these are the ones that are still outstanding, and less directed, because again, that process where they are, that's up to the department, right, to figure out a way to best do that.
Are you able to tell us when we're going to see those responses, Sergeant Tingley, or you're just telling us that they're in the works?
They're in the works. We're working hard on them. You guys are going to get the responses. Trust me, you're going to get the responses. And so we'll go with that for now. We'll keep you in the loop, and we'll make sure that everybody understands that these are coming through. And as soon as Paul gets them, he will. I'm sure he'll publish them and allow you to review them.
Marianne, if you do have questions about some of the recommendations that have been approved or not, we do have those on record, if that would help you. Maybe for the last one.
I'm familiar with them. I just
Okay.
thought that it might be helpful to folks that aren't as familiar, or maybe as a bit of a recap as part of a presentation and training. That's all I meant.
Vice Chair Pintar, if all goes well, our annual report for 2022, if all goes well, should be able to be provided in February to you folks. In that 2022 annual report, we'll have every policy recommendation we made in 2022. And as of that writing, the status, where they were recommended, implemented or not. So that I will definitely be doing at the February meeting. Does that help?
I think that would be very helpful, Paul, because yes, we have received responses to many of them, but that doesn't mean all of them have been adopted or implemented. So I just think that a summation of that, which you're right, as part of the annual report, would be helpful to everybody.
And one of the things that, in reference to that, if we had a different type of model, an audit monitoring type of model, as opposed to just investigatory advisory only, we would be able to follow up with the department from a different perspective to be able to look at the status of certain things. But we don't have that model. That's not where we are at this point. So.
Dr. Brown, did you have another question, or is that a legacy hand?
I think that's.
I should have lowered it.
Yeah,
okay.
We're going to ignore his hand, but Chair Delaney, we do have one member of the public wishing to speak.
Okay.
Dr. Fishman.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't going to speak, but I just want to make sure my comments were understood. I really did serve for the Community Review Board on police practice in San Diego. And it really is a legal policy to be able to meet with law enforcement. We did have a policy committee. There's already things in place, models. You don't have to reinvent the wheel with this. There were pluses and minuses what we had, but we certainly were able to meet with the police, law enforcement directly in a it was an informal setting in terms of the committee meeting, not like this. And we were really able to hash out policy and talk about what we wanted, and they were able to talk about their concerns. I do think it's a better process than what you guys have. You don't have to go far to explore it. And the other thing is it has open to the public. The public rarely came to those committee meetings, but they were posted and they were given an opportunity if they wanted to come. I think it'll go a long way having that transparency and helping to build better relationships with the community if you open that up. It passes legal standards. There's obviously other cities, other jurisdictions that do that already. Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quickly, to Dr. Fishman's point, that is true. However, we are providing oversight services to a constitutionally elected official. It is totally different than a civilian oversight entity for a municipal police department. And that is what a lot of people, it's very difficult to grasp, because it's difficult for us to grasp as well. But this is where we stand. And so everything that we are doing is advisory only, and that's the way it is. with the current model as is. So that's why it's more difficult with a constitutionally elected official. And I hope that folks will understand as we move forward, that we're doing everything we can, but the sheriff's department is a different entity.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. All right, if we have no other questions, comments for our probation or sheriff's liaisons, council, could you read us into closed session, please? And we'll meet back here.
Chair Delaney,
Yes.
I apologize. It looks like there is one final request.
Oh, okay, sure.
I somehow overlooked.
Sure.
John Settles. John Settles.
Hello. Can you
Mr.
hear me?
Settles. Yes, we can.
Hi, thanks so much for letting me speak. I appreciate everything you guys are doing. This has been great, very educational. Just wanted to have a quick question. Now that you went through all that, what is there a process to move it forward where you are not necessarily just an advisory committee, but where you actually can assist in making policy? Because you say currently that's where we stand. Wondering if there's a process to move forward with that. And I guess that's what I'm curious about. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. In response to the public comment, there are things that would need to be done. And we don't necessarily know at this point what the right way to go about or how that goes about. You may have to go back to the voters. It possibly is something that could be approved by the Board of Supervisors. These are things that we're currently investigating as we speak on how to what is the ideal or the appropriate oversight entity for this area. And so we're still looking at that. I mean, actually, we are looking at that. That's on our agenda, on our radar. And as we move forward, we'll see what we can do.
Thank you. Anyone else? Paula, can you see anyone else there?
No.
Okay. Okay, so we will meet back in 5 minutes. And council, could you please read us into closed session?
Sure. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, this board will adjourn into closed session to consider item 11 on tonight's agenda.
Thank you.